All aboard! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, football fans of all ages, I am Beast Mike, and you've now arrived in my train of thought. It's also time to ask the question, where do we go from here? One last video for this series for this year. I'm glad I feel much better because I was not feeling great last week. But anyway, we're at conference championships and further. We got 4 teams left. That means the Lions, the Ravens, the Niners, and the Chiefs. That is the order of which this is going to go. Let's get to it. First, Detroit. And it's a mixed bag for me when it comes to the Lions. On one hand, they kind of sort of realized their potential. They were really good last year. They figured a lot of things out. Dan Campbell was really good as a coach, even though he took way too many risks at times. And their roster, which was really, really well constructed, played to the best of their ability for the most part. Yes, their pass defense is still terrible. Their defense as a whole still isn't great, but they played really well. They might have had and I'm not even sure if might have is the right word, they probably had the best draft of anybody last year. We all wondered, why would it take Jahmyr Gibbs so high? And then Jahmyr Gibbs really balled out and was an outstanding rookie running back. We wondered, why take Jack Campbell in the first round? And Jack Campbell was very stable in the linebacking core. His Iowa teammate, Sam Laporta, we thought probably should have been taken with the pick that Campbell was taken, but they stole him at the start of the second round. And Laporta was amazing, and probably their second best receiver after Amon-Ra St. Brown. Well, receiving threat, pass-catching threat, I should say. And then, they were able to finesse the Packers and got Brian Branch at a position that Green Bay desperately needed just as much as Detroit did. Brian Branch only had a pick 6 in his first game and turned out to be a very good safety when he was healthy. He did miss some games due to injury. Now, yes, the Lions' pass defense, Branch aside, was pretty bad. And not having Cam Sutton this coming year is probably going to hurt because of Cam Sutton's off-field issues. But I like what Detroit is building. They're building something very effective and efficient. Jared Goff played really well. And obviously, the Lions as a whole have an excellent offensive line in front of Goff. They have done a smart job in protecting and keeping their own there. They're going to have to pay Penei Sewell top dollar when it's time to pay him. He will deserve every penny. But did Detroit have their best shot? And after they made the run that they did at the end of their playoff drought and beating the Rams and then beating the Bucs, they had a golden opportunity to go to the Super Bowl and beating the Niners, and they kind of sort of got in their own way. Brandon Ayuk cooked them deep on the play that changed the game. Dan Campbell took too many risks instead of taking the 3 several times. And the one time when he took the 3 and could have gone 7 and really put the Niners in a chokehold, he opted to only go 3 at the end of the half. And that might have been a game-changing decision in a game where there were several of them. Ultimately, Detroit's going to be really good, but they're going to have to be really good and probably great to hold off a Packer team that is oncoming and a Bears team that's going to load up with the 1st and 9th picks of the draft. The Lions will be picking 29th in this draft, and in theory, keeping their defense together and strong probably works, or maybe the Lions even go bold on offense and maybe they make a move at a receiver or even trade for T. Higgins or Brandon Ayuk. Maybe not Ayuk, but maybe they'll trade for T. Higgins or something. The Lions have options, and they're going to host the draft this year, and in theory, Detroit's probably going to go big, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Detroit will do going forward. Great season, Lions. No regrets. For Baltimore, did they have their best shot? Like Detroit, they made a really good run, the Ravens did, and the Ravens are very well constructed. These two teams actually played each other, and this is one of the games where Baltimore was tested, and not only did they passed as valedictorians. They destroyed every really good team in front of them. They played the Lions and Seahawks early in the season. They destroyed them both. They played a good Cleveland team early in the season. They destroyed them. Now, granted, Cleveland didn't have Deshaun Watson, but some could argue the Browns played better without him. They played the Niners and the Dolphins in a 6-day span and destroyed them both when they had a chance to not only get the 1 seed, but lock up MVP for Lamar Jackson, which is exactly what they did because they shredded probably the best defense aside from them in the league and the most dynamic offense in the league. The Ravens were battle-tested and pretty much won every battle that wasn't the Steelers. Granted, they didn't need the second game because they wrapped up the 1 seed with the Dolphins win. And then for some reason, even Houston, well, we didn't know what Houston was at week 1, but we did know what Houston was at the divisional round. They were smashed. And then there's Kansas City. Baltimore, for some reason, went away from what they normally do. They didn't run the ball as efficiently, or in some cases at all. And Lamar Jackson, they said, go win us the game with your arm. And then he didn't. And then he made a tragically horrible play that ended the game. And on the drive before that, Zay Flowers made 2 horrible decisions. One of which was the taunting penalty. And then he made up for it, fortunately, on his end. But then he fumbled the ball, which, to be fair to him, that's more great defense by the Chiefs than Flowers fumbling the game away. The taunting penalty is on Flowers, though. He had a great rookie season, like a lot of us thought that he would. Because Baltimore, when it comes to their draft picks, they normally don't miss. I don't think there's a team I trust more when it comes to their drafting instincts than the Ravens. They don't usually miss with this. They didn't really miss with Patrick Queen either. Queen was a very good secondary interior linebacker to the guy who I think really changed their defense around in Roquan Smith. Queen going to the Steelers is going to hurt, but I do think the Ravens are going to be fine because Baltimore generally is. They, in turn, they lost to Queen, but about an hour before, it seemed, they gained a king. There is no better fit when it comes to free agent this past offseason and a guy who can fit that team and fit their culture than Derrick Henry to Baltimore. Christian Wilkins to the Raiders probably second, but Derrick Henry to Baltimore is just an outstanding fit. A team that is physical and is built to beat you up and built to be bullies with a running back who's been the greatest bully in the league over the last decade. And Derrick Henry with Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers and a healthy Mark Andrews and company is going to be nasty. And an offensive line that's road graders and physical and tough, that's going to be nasty. Sure, Baltimore's got to replace the loss of Patrick Queen, but I trust the Ravens' ability to do that. I also trust the Ravens' ability to get a little bit better in the secondary, and them keeping Justin Matabuki was a very smart decision. Can it get a little bit better with getting to the quarterback, and can it get a little bit better in the secondary to pair with Kyle Hamilton and Marlon Humphrey? I expect them to. They are the Ravens. They draft really well. And obviously, the other part is Baltimore's coaching. Pretty much all their defensive coaches are gone in some capacity. Anthony Weaver's the defensive coordinator in Miami. Mike McDonald's going to Seattle as their head coach. They lost a lot of, for example, they lost a lot of their personnel in that realm because the Ravens were so good on defense. History tells us that the Ravens are going to draft well once again with the 30th overall pick. Baltimore obviously is going to be a true contender for the Super Bowl once again, but the real question is, did Baltimore just burn their best shot at getting Lamar Jackson a ring? And now we're down to 2. It's the Super Bowl teams, the Chiefs and the Niners. First, we go to San Francisco. And aside from a 3-game stretch where Brock Purdy looked pretty bad with the concussion and their defense didn't look very good at all. It seemed like they didn't fit Steve Wilkes' style or scheme. And Joe Burrow shredded them as the 3rd game. And Kirk Cousins cooked them with the first game of the second game of that, I should say. It felt like the Niners were never in any real danger of being challenged in the NFC sans Ravens game I mentioned in the regular season. The Niners crushed many challenges before them because Brock Purdy was so efficient, and Christian McCaffrey was outstanding, and another All-Pro year, and obviously the Offensive Player of the Year, as we just mentioned. Brandon Ayuk's breakout season happened. Deebo Samuel cooked. George Kittle cooked. Kyle Juszczyk was amazing. Voltron is very real. Obviously, Trent Williams is, I would say, the anchor to this, and without him, a lot of Voltron doesn't happen the way it does. As much as I've talked about giving the Niners the nickname Voltron about their offense, I could argue that their defense is a Voltron, with Fuaga, who should be back from his torn ACL, being one of the better safeties in the game, and Ward, who was outstanding at corner, who had an all-pro caliber season, an all-pro year, I should say. Fred Warner, who's the best middle linebacker in the game. Nick Bosa, who's one of the best edge rushers in the game. Javon Hargrave is one of the best D tackles in the game. Dre Greenlaw, who had a horrible torn Achilles injury in the Super Bowl, and I hope he's going to be healthy at the very least some point in the season, because that's a devastating injury. He's one of the best middle linebackers in the game as well, to pair with Fred Warner. they got Leonard Floyd to help with Bosa. And I think he's going to be a pretty good secondary pass rusher. He's a former Super Bowl champion in his own right. So I want to see what he's able to do with this pass rush and this nasty, nasty defense. Now, the Niners aren't without their warts. They do have some holes on an offensive line that, to be honest, after Trent Williams, is a little questionable to me. When Williams was injured, the Niners allowed teams to get home quite a bit, and it absolutely caused some trouble for Brock Purdy. So, in theory, dressing their offensive line would probably be a good idea. They're going to have to start paying some people, and it's going to be a little challenging because Brock Purdy is going to go from making nothing by NFL standards to making a lot of money because of how successful he's been. Brandon Ayuk is trying to cash in, as we have seen over the last few months, and it feels like it's inevitable that he's going to cash in. We've already seen the Niners pay pretty much all the players I've mentioned before, and there's going to be a bill due. This was going to cause a little bit of trouble when it comes to keeping those guys. They'll be picking 31st, and San Francisco's generally good at drafting. The real question is, can they keep everyone together and keep things efficient like they have been over the last few years in the Kyle Shanahan era? And then there are the Tribal Chiefs. We thought we had them at their weakest. A suspect receiving core, a defense that was kind of sort of unproven, a theory that you can't win them all. They weren't going to have all their playoff games at Arrowhead because of how inefficient the regular season was, with all the drops and the penalties and the mistakes and the inefficiencies. They looked bad in some of their losses, and they made a bunch of mistakes that cost them games that were absolutely winnable in past years. And yet they won the title anyway. And yet, whenever they needed a big play, it's as if a switch was flipped. And the regular season Chiefs were far different and far less recognizable compared to the playoff Chiefs. Going into that Dolphins game, Kansas City didn't look right. They looked terrible against the Raiders. They didn't try against the Chargers and won anyway, because of course they did. And they didn't look like anywhere near the Chiefs that were the playoff-bound Chiefs. After the first series, then Kansas City looked normal. And their defense, which was the one constant this past year, looked excellent. Then the Bills, they needed to make a play. They needed to make several plays. They were able to. Yes, Buffalo made their mistakes, but whenever Kansas City needed to make something happen on offense, they were able to, and they didn't make the mistakes that they had made in the regular season. Well, except for a couple of Mecole Hardman fumbles, one of which cost them a touchdown, the Chiefs were efficient and effective against the Bills and did what they needed to do. Also, Tyler Bass missing a kick wide right helped as well, but you get the idea. They were effective and efficient. And then the Ravens, where whenever the defense needed to make a play, whenever the defense needed to stop Baltimore from scoring or force a turnover, they did. They made a defining play with the Zay Flowers fumble at the 1, and then the game-ending play effectively, because the Ravens just weren't going to have enough time to do it, with the NO that really was a terrible decision by Lamar Jackson, to be honest. But they made the play and got the NO. It kept Isaiah Likely from scoring to end those proceedings. And then the Super Bowl. It felt like all they needed to do was make sure that Mahomes had a shot, and 15 was going to bring it home for them. And I think Kansas City, even if the Niners had scored a touchdown on their first drive, probably go for 2. I don't think Kansas City would have given San Francisco another opportunity on offense. I wouldn't have. And with the way Andy Reid has been coaching over the years, he's usually aggressive. He would probably have gone for 2 and said, Pat, you got it, go win the game. They didn't have to, obviously, because their defense only allowed 3. And then once Kansas City got that 4th and 1, and the Niners couldn't stop Mahomes from getting those easy yards when it came to running it, game was over. It was just a matter of time and a fait accompli that Kansas City was going to bring this home. When your floor, Kansas City, is overtime AFC Championship game and you don't get the ball over the last 6 years, that is as terrifying as it kind of gets for everyone else. Mind you, in New England's first half of their dynasty, the year that they didn't win the title and they're 3-4, they missed the playoffs. Not even Kansas City's come close to doing that. Yes, the Patriots, during their second half of their dynastic run, had a floor of the AFC Championship in Denver, but at least Kansas City has had overtime and didn't get the ball as their floor when it comes to their dynastic run as it currently is. That's how special Kansas City has been. And if Kansas City can win a title with a suspect offense and an offensive line that's much maligned for their holdings and the penalties that they get away with and things of that nature, imagine them when their roster improves. And it's probably going to, considering Mahomes took the restructure, and with the 32nd pick, a team that normally drafts pretty well, especially on defense, can go once again and improve their offense and their wide receiver, or maybe replace L'Jarius Sneed at corner, or maybe get better offensive line help. Kansas City is not without their flaws. Unfortunately for everyone else, they have the best coach in the game, the best quarterback in the modern era. That's not Tom Brady, obviously, career-wise, and enough high-end skill pieces on defense and some on offense to help them be what they have been. Will the dynasty continue for the Tribal Chiefs, or will somebody else finish their story for them? So that's all 32 teams. That's a thought about the last 4 squads, especially in this video. The next thing I'm going to do is Beastly Mock Draft Season. Obviously, I'm going to take a bit of it from a Dolphins perspective, but I'm also going to look at it from the other 32 and kind of analyze them as we go. That's where I'm going to go from here. And this is the final stop of this train of thought.